Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to keep us moving along here as things are starting to settle out. My name is Will, and I'm the founder of TriggerPoint. We're a behavioral research and design consultancy. So we specialize in understanding non-conscious factors that influence human behavior, and we integrate those into mainly messaging, a little bit of innovation. Today, what I want to talk a little bit about is this vision of becoming a behavioral designer, and hopefully I'm going to do it, in a relatively fun way. We're going to go through about 70 years of cognitive psychology. So that is not going to happen in the matter of 45 minutes or whatever. So I'm just going to kind of throw out some tidbits. The stuff that we'll be talking about, most of it is inside of the book. So anybody who doesn't have a book should at some point go on over to the back. There's 2 cardboard boxes, grab a book. Because you'll want to, some of the things that we're going to talk about for the next couple of minutes are in the book. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you to MMR Research Associates. They're the ones who bought all these books and had me come in. So thank you very much for that. There you go. All right. So let me start off like this. We talked about it yesterday, and certainly John talked about it today, this idea of VUCA. And I learned that concept about 10 years ago when I was at an Institute for the Future conference. And this whole story is kind of in the book. But the idea is this, that the world is incredibly complex. Why? It's a technology issue, I think. Today, especially in advertising, technology has now made it to where all barriers to entry in the advertising world are gone, right? It's too easy to become an ad agency. You can literally start a business on your iPhone, create advertising, place advertising on social feeds, and then get feedback all before you have a first cup of coffee. It's that easy, guys. So everybody is marketing. Everybody's an agency now. And because of that, we see worlds like this, where digital marketing experts estimate that most Americans are exposed to 4,000 to 10,000 advertisements each day, not brand impressions, adverts, right? Imagine all the advertising. Imagine all the complexity. We talk about it, or John even said it, 35,000 decisions you're making any given day. So how do you live in this world? You have a very sophisticated psychological filter, and it works so well. It basically filters the vast majority of information that you're seeing any given day. Estimates are at something around 99.975%. I don't know how they got that number. I just know this. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's being filtered. And because of that, we got to understand this filter. This filter is incredibly important if you're in the advertising world because it helps you do 3 things. It helps you understand why people do what they do. It helps you predict what they're going to do in the future. And it helps you influence. And if you're in the insights industry, this is your job, right? This is what you do. So what we want to do is understand this filter. If you want to get to a point where you influence, what you want to do is think about influence through 4 different social sciences. The first one is goal theory, right? Or jobs to be done. We talked a little bit about jobs to be done yesterday, but it's really understanding what people want. Once you understand what people want, functional goals as well as higher order goals, the next thing you want to understand is why do they want it? It's a motivational theory, right? So there are 9 core motivations. We're going to talk about all this stuff in the next couple minutes, but it's really understand motivations, because motivations are the engines that drive you to reach your to reach your goals. Once I understand what you want and why you want it, next thing I want to do is understand how do you approach it. That's regulatory fit theory, Tori Higgins' work out of Columbia University. So that just kind of helps you navigate your path or your goals, I guess. So after you understand what you want, why you want it, and how do you approach it, last thing you want to do is understand heuristics, right? This is behavioral economics 101. It's understanding that we have shortcuts that help us make decisions very quickly. So who cares? Like, why is this important? Like, okay, these are great insights, maybe, but why is that important? Because if you take these insights and you apply those into marketing, you can activate what you want, you can prime why they want it, you can frame how they should approach it, and ultimately trigger an action. If you do this well in whatever marketing agency you're using, if you do this well, you're much more likely to increase emotional arousal or hot state decision-making. Hot state decision-making is really important because we're in hot states, we're more susceptible to influence. That's why Vegas gets us in so much trouble, right? So we're more susceptible to influence. And why is that important? Because now marketing works. Marketing works because emotional arousal. You talk about emotional marketing, there's science behind that. It's actually called a mind state. So when you have a moment of high emotional arousal, you go through these all throughout the day. You're not aware most of the time of emotional arousal. It's outside of the conscious awareness. but you're influenced very significantly by these mind states. So understanding these mind states is really, really important. It's the science behind emotional marketing because it messages to the heart, that's system one, non-conscious, but also messages to the conscious rational system too, the post-rationalization system of your decision-making. It overlays on top of any brand model you have. If you're doing love marks, great, you can use this. If you're doing storytelling, great, you can use this. Any kind of brand model that you're using at your company or that you're learning about in school, this overlays on top of it. A mind state is not a segmentation. It is not a personality type. It is a moment in time. And why that's important is because we act differently in moments of time. And I talk about a couple of these times in my book. Vegas is a good example. When you're really, really hungry, that's another great example of you have attitudes, you have belief systems, you have values. The problem with understanding that stuff, through your attitudinal segmentation, is that stuff's not stable. Your attitudes, your belief systems, they kind of fluctuate based upon physiological reasons, psychological reasons. If you're in love, you behave very differently. You have different thoughts than if you're really, really angry. If you're hungry, your attitudes around food are very different than you are when you're full, right? So understanding these points in time are very, very important. Ultimately, the idea is influencing consumer behaviors because you're linking behavioral psychology directly into your marketing through a scientific method, right? And that's the kind of, in my world, the holy grail. We're not guesstimating what kind of emotion do I want to integrate into a piece of marketing. You don't have to do that. Motivational psychology tells you what emotion to use, right? Ultimately, here's why. I left a great corporate job I was running behavioral science over at PepsiCo. I left that job because I believe that we are being marginalized in an industry, in the marketing research industry, because we're not thinking of ourselves as choice architects. We have to think of ourselves, we have to architect preference. We have to understand brands. We have to grow brands and help our brand managers grow incredible experiences. We got to keep doing that, but we have to do more. We have to think about building choices through behavioral design, through using these tactics that are very clearly spelled out in academia, but nobody seems to be using them in corporate America. It's getting better. And thinking of ourselves as these builders of choice as well. And we're gonna do that through a little thing called Game of Thrones. So, who here watched Game of Thrones? That's what I need to see. I did this a month ago, and only 20 people in the whole audience saw it. I was like, oh, this is going to be a rough one. Even if you haven't, it doesn't matter. We're going to explain Game of Thrones over to you. The idea is we're going to use Game of Thrones, and we're going to look at characters through this lens, this model of mind states. And we're going to work as tables to identify mind states and influence some of the key characters in Game of Thrones. And hopefully it'll be fun for you. First off, if you guys know anything about Game of Thrones, the last season, some people think that was a bad season. I'm not here to say that it's a great season. I'm just going to say it was unfulfilling. It was a little unfulfilling. Who's with me? You didn't like it? You said it was bad? See, I just felt, really? Really? That's okay. We're going to create our own ending. That's what this workshop's a little bit about. That's right. So let's first kind of just talk through Game of Thrones, and I'll explain some of the characters. Either way, even if you don't know it, hopefully you'll want to see Game of Thrones afterwards. So here's going to be the game as we go through this activity. First, there's this guy by the name of Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion is an important researcher. He's an incredible. If you want to understand what your role is, if you're like, I don't know what a researcher even does anymore, this is your guy. Not the things that he does that are kind of a little weird, right? Right? No. Think about the idea of influence, right? This guy, Tyrion Lannister is basically the king's hand. And the king's hand in the Game of Thrones idea is that he gives wisdom and knowledge to the king or queen or whatever. So he's influencing, right? So he looks at the environment, context, and he's always trying to basically swing decisions in the best interest of the king and ultimately really to himself too, just like a good researcher. So that's what you're going to be doing over the course of the next half hour, whatever. You're going to be Tyrion Lannister, the king's hand. And you must influence your future king or queen using mind states, the stuff that we're going to talk about. So what's going to happen is there are packets on your table. Do not open them up yet. I saw that. I should have said out front, don't open them up yet. You're going to be that much farther away. But the idea is that you are going to be Tyrion Lannister. Don't read it. You're going to be Tyrion Lannister, and each table is going to have a different king or queen or potential king or queen, and you're going to influence. And you're going to use this mind state idea to help you influence. So First thing we want to understand are people's goals, right? Remember, people act towards their goals. Every action you took, even when you walked in through that door, whether you knew it or not, you had a goal, right? So it's important to understand the functional goals as well as the higher order goals. So they direct all of our decisions and actions outside of maybe a reflex behavior, right? So the idea is that goals are always giving you direction. Think of them as a target. If you don't know the goals of your customer, you can't possibly be very effective in your marketing because people's goals change. You have to remind people about their goals. There are two types of goals. There are functional goals and higher order goals. Functional goals are those goals that you get in traditional marketing research. I want to save time, I want to save money, I want to get healthier, I want to lose some weight. Functional, awesome goals, good to know, but they're not as important as emotional goals or higher order goals is what we call them. That's where emotional arousal starts. Non-conscious, your goals are always not always non-conscious, shouldn't say that, but often non-conscious and often influenced in the moment. Always important to do research in context as best possible in the moment of a decision, right? Because that's where goals lie. And we always act towards a goal, whether we know it or not. So let's talk about goals. If you know anything about Game of Thrones, there's a key character called Jon Snow. Jon Snow is a bastard. Like a bastard son. He's not like a bastard, but a bastard son. He, they introduced him very early on in the show, and he is the bastard son of Ned Stark, the king of the North. He's hated by Catelyn, right? Catelyn is a stepmom. She hates him. She thinks, because he's a bastard, why wouldn't you hit him? And he's treated by an outsider as many. In fact, he doesn't carry his father's name. He can't carry his father's name. He has to carry Jon Snow. Snow is just kind of a bastard name that they give anybody who's a bastard in the North, right? Snow. So he defers to the loyalty. If you know anything about Jon Snow, he defers to the loyalty to a group in almost all occasions. I'm going to show you this in a little bit. Next, dreaded Cersei Lannister. Cersei, she could literally be one of the most incredible villains of all time. Love her. Her goal, if you think about her high order goal, is I would suggest it's to gain as much power as possible. Cersei understands the truth that if you control the king, you control the kingdom. Because in this world, queens aren't really, the legitimacy of the throne often lies with the males. So she understands that. And so she's like, okay, if I control the male king, I actually have the power. And she is really good at doing that. She uses her wit, her charm to forge her new path, her own path to power, however difficult it may be. And there are lots of great examples of how she does that. Because she understands with power comes more control and ultimately better access to the Iron Throne. If you own the Iron Throne, you control the entire world, basically. So that's Cersei Lannister. Gain as much power as possible. Then we have Daenerys Targaryen. She's another character in the throne. Daenerys is a part of a Targaryen family who used to have the throne. If you don't know anything about the show, her whole family used to control the throne. Family was assassinated. Almost all, except for two characters, are Targaryens. They're the last two Targaryens that we know of in the whole universe or on the planet anyways. And so her goal is I want to achieve the destiny that I have, which was break the political power wheel. She's sick of kings killing and wars and things like that. So her goal is all about achieving her destiny and breaking this cycle of just death leads to next king, death leads to next king, etc. So she's been told since a very small girl of her family's right to the throne. She has seen her family absolutely decimated by other houses seeking power. And she's freed cities throughout the series. She frees cities from slavery, and she's felt the benefits that come with that idea of breaking the political power wheel. So before I go on any further, does anyone fundamentally disagree with this? I'm looking at you. See anything that's kind of weird? Maybe. Do you at least agree? You kind of agree? We could debate.
Yeah, you're good. I'd let you know if it wasn't.
All right, I know you would. That's good. All right, so these are goals. Important to understand because our behaviors in moments of high emotional arousal, we will go after our goals, especially higher order goals in almost all accounts, right? So it's important to know that. Next, the engine behind our goals, right? What drives us to go after these goals, these higher order goals? Well, motivational psychology has kind of been aggregated. We could debate this a little bit, but ultimately I see that there are 9 core human motivations that drive the vast majority of decisions that we make. We could throw in sex in here. We could probably throw in some things like eating, but those feel biological to me. So at this point, I think of these as psychological motivations. And some of them are things like you would expect. achievement, the desire to feel successful, victorious, and proud by overcoming obstacles, right? Typical type A student, or maybe like straight A student, wants to be the very best in her class, or Olympic athletes, right? Driven by achievement, overcoming the next obstacle. Another one could be autonomy, the desire to feel unique, independent, and distinct from others. Very Desi and Ryan here. A lot of HR groups are trying to figure out how do we give freedom to employees to make them more productive, right? Because a lot of people desire greater freedom and individuality. Belonging is one, right? The desire, it's like a tribe, to feel aligned, accepted, and connected with others. Security, very Maslow there, to feel secure, safe, and protected from threats. So there's 9 of these things. It's important to understand why, like the emotional reason on why people go after their goals resides in this space here. It doesn't have to be 1, by the way. It could be maybe 2. You get more than 3 in your research, I'm starting to question it a bit because you're trying to get into secondary motivations, things like that. It gets a bit cloudy. But the idea here is one of these, or maybe 2 of these motivations, are influencing your customers. And in this case, if I am Tyrion Lannister, these are my customers. So, any ideas of people who have watched Game of Thrones? Jon Snow. We just talked about, he's the bastard son, legitimately a rightful king, we find out later on in the series. Any idea, any guesses on the key motivation that drives Jon Snow up here?
Belonging.
You like esteem? Belonging? Awesome.
Security.
Security. Yep, I can see that. How about Cersei? Empowerment. That's right. I already gave that up. She loves that control, right? To feel empowered, authorized, and equipped to act. How about Daenerys? Esteem. I haven't heard that one before. Autonomy. I like autonomy. I've never heard that either, but I could totally go with autonomy. I see some achievement in there because of her desire. I mean, she is so singularly focused on breaking this wheel and bettering the world that she overcomes many, many obstacles, oftentimes by burning and eating, having her dragons eat people. But either way, she overcomes obstacles. All right. So I think I agree. You can make a case. I didn't do any research on this. It's just my interpretation of Game of Thrones. I wish they'd hire me to do it. But I think that it is belonging, right? He finds and leads his band of brothers all the time with the Night's Watch, right? He joins and fights with the wildlings. When he creates a tribe around him, he goes to battle for his tribe, right? He fights for his adopted family at the Battle of the Bastards. Great scene and episode if you've never seen. It's one of the greatest episodes of any show, won awards. And he refuses to bend the knee to Cersei Lannister because he's already bent the knee to Daenerys, which is so crazy because if he bends the knee to Cersei Lannister, he legitimately can save the planet. And he chooses not to because it would be against his tribe, his oath, right? Drove me crazy, that episode. I wanted to kill that guy. Okay, so empowerment, we already talked about that. If you know anything about Cersei, she uses people to control her situation all the time. She successfully plotted to have her husband and the king, Robert, killed. She worked with Qyburn to bring the mountain back to life. So she uses, black magic, chemistry, whatever you want to call it, to bring the mountain back to life, and teamed up with the High Scepter to gain influence over her own son, Tommen, right? So she controls people's situations incredibly well to better empower herself. And lastly, like I said, I kind of think of Daenerys around achievement, right? She liberates Meereen not once, but twice to show her abilities. She uses her dragons as a weapon first and foremost. She doesn't really often negotiate real well. She'd just rather, burn people. And she sees and burns people oftentimes people as obstacles. And because she sees people, and sometimes, especially in some of the later episodes, she sees them not as people as she kind of did earlier on. She has a great empathy, but she starts seeing them as people eliminate her ability to reach the broader thing of I can kill this 30,000 people so I can save the entire world, right? So she starts seeing people as obstacles and things versus people. It's kind of weird for her because she started off pretty solid. So that's motivational psychology. So we understand what people want. We understand the higher order goals of Jon Snow, Cersei Lannister, and Daenerys. We understand the core motivation, debatable, but I think those are pretty solid. Next, let's talk about what I talked about from Tori Higginsworth, promotion versus prevention. Here's the idea, guys. 30 years of research from Columbia University. There's this guy by the name of Tori Higgins. I talk about him in the book. There's a whole chapter on it. And this is the idea that we all go after our goals in one of two ways. We all go after our goals in one of two ways. One is called promotion, one is called prevention. Think of it as kind of a GPS, right? Kind of sets you to what's the most kind of logical or easier path for you to go after your goal. So if you're using a promotion approach, you are thinking about maximizing your chances of success, right? So when you're in this moment of time, and you are not one or the other, you're both. There are certain moments you're one or the other. There are certain categories that you tend to go after in whether it's a promotion or prevention way. So you're not one or the other, but you have tendency. I tend to be a little bit prevention, which is about minimizing failure, right? Risk reward. I try to lower risk in most things. Other things, I'll maximize gains. As an entrepreneur, I'm much more promotion. In my life and around food, I'm much more around prevention, right? So you're not one or the other, you're both, but you have tendencies. So do our characters. So if you're in a promotion regulatory state, or you're going to use a promotion approach, meaning you are seeking to maximize gains. You are going to swing for the fences to reach your goal. So in these moments, you will seek brands, messages, strategies, anything that reconfirms that if I take this action, I am more likely to reach my goal. Swing for the fences. You could have the exact same person, the exact same motivation. Other people will go through a prevention lens. They'll use a prevention approach about going after their goals. So in these moments, this person's trying to minimize risk, right? Same goals, same motivations, but they see things like, let me avoid obstacles and risks so I can ultimately reach my goal. It sounds like a small nuance, guys. It is a big nuance when you're talking about copy and creative. It's a very big nuance that you can actually psychologically get your advertising, your persuasive argument more receptively kind of felt because you're going down the path that they kind of think through how to reach that goal. So let's go back to our characters. Jon Snow. I actually think this guy's a little more prevention. Here's why. Several times what he does through these episodes, he seeks to appease his family by preventing himself from being ostracized. He's always thinking about, how do I not get myself alienated from the group? To an extent, he's not seeking another tribe. He's not looking for the promotion. He loves where he is. So he tries to stay with the Night's Watch. He tries to stay with the Wildlings. He tries to not become the King of the North. He reluctantly accepts it, but he doesn't really strive for that. He just wants to have a group of people that he feels that love him and love him back, or at least respect him. And so some of the things like, he talks, you'll see it in his language. Thousands of men don't have to die. Only one of us. He will sacrifice himself for his brethren, for his tribe. Then when I look at, our two other characters, Cersei and Daenerys, I think they're kind of a little more promotion in their actions, especially in key moments of the series. So, if you know anything about Cersei, she blows up the Great Sept, which is crazy, guys. She destroys this massive church and all the people in it. It's nuts. And her kid, right? Well, she wasn't positive, but she didn't care. I don't think she would have cared, frankly. She aligns with Aaron Greyjoy instead of sending her troops to battle the White Walkers, which is arguably going to destroy the entire planet. And just even the words she uses, I am a lioness. I will not cringe for them. And then lastly, promotion approach with Daenerys. She rides her dragons into various battles at great personal risk. She swings for the fences all the time. She uses her ability to burn all the call leadership all at one time. And I think that was series 4, or in the fourth series, I guess. And things like, I will take what is mine, a very important quote, with fire and blood, right? I will overcome that obstacle with fire and blood. So one kind of cool thing, what I'll tell you about how do you understand, or how do you get to these insights? The book will teach you some activities that we do. But what's actually really cool is in stories, when we have people tell stories, past stories, future stories, what do I want to be in the future when I'm in this category? What do I want my pet to feel, or how do I want to feel about my pet? All those types of things. It's in the stories that we tell ourselves and that we tell others. All the insights are in there. It's like poker. They're little tells. So we actually ran a ton of dialogue through, we have an artificial intelligence platform to identify a mind state, and they came up pretty good, right? So it's funny that if you get people to tell stories, you can pick up on this stuff, and you can pick up the words that they use, and then you can tell whether she's in a promotion or prevention of regulatory approach, et cetera. So when you get people to tell stories, especially past experiences or in the moment, if you can get somebody to tell a story in the moment, third-party projection, you can get at some of these deeper kind of psychological factors. All right. So we're not going to go into cognitive heuristics just because that's massive and it's not worth it. I love it, though. I love behavioral economics, but we're not going to worry about that. So in my world, here's what we do. I just now identified two factors for you, the motivation as well as the regulatory approach, promotion prevention. So we said that Jon Snow, he was driven by belonging. So he has the belonging motivation, but he uses a prevention approach. He tries to not be excluded from his tribes. He does everything he can, in fact, to not lose the loyalty of the broader group. In my world, that's called cautious belonging. Prevention mind state, he's driven by a belonging motivation. That's called cautious belonging. Cersei, optimistic empowerment. She's driven by the empowerment motivation. She uses a promotion regulatory state of, or she's oftentimes in a promotion regulatory state. And optimistic achievement mind state, when emotional arousal, like when Daenerys, when she sees in the very last episode or close to the last episode, when she knows that she needs to she just makes this determination that she needs to kill Cersei Lannister. She decides to burn an entire city and all the population down. That is optimistic achievement. In that moment, she was so angry and so furious that she arguably killed thousands and thousands of people. So optimistic achievement. She uses promotion approach, swings for the fences with the dragons, and she uses the achievement motivation to drive her. Good or bad, that's what she uses. So let's go into our activity. Well, before we do the activity, let me tell you what this gives you. So, okay, who cares? Optimistic achievement or whatever, what does that tell me? Well, the idea, guys, is that when you understand somebody's mind state, you can now message much more effectively because you can create that emotional arousal just by using some of these tactics. We have these things called behavioral activation briefs that tell you how to message better, or at least more effectively psychologically, to activate that emotional arousal. These things tend to be about 10 slides total. And I'm just going to show you 2 slides for the activity, but they basically walk you from what's happening psychologically in that moment all the way down to specific tactics, like dilate the pupils of the lead model's eye because you can create reciprocity, have the lead model look away from the camera, things like that, because this stuff is all tactically available if you just choose to use it. So I'm going to show you Jon Snow. You guys are going to, at your tables, have the access to the other behavioral activation briefs for your characters. But one of the very first things is kind of understanding the mind state characteristics. I use this slide to build empathy, right? So if I'm going to my creative team, I'm like, this is kind of what's happening in the moment. You would overlay this on top of your attitudinal segmentation, right? So don't think it doesn't replace your attitudinal segmentation. It just tells you the behavioral psychology in these moments of somebody who's in your attitudinal segmentation, your behavioral segmentation, your demographic segmentation, right? So in this moment, Jon Snow, in key moments like the Battle of the Bastards, driven to feel acceptance by others by avoiding mistakes that may cause them to be excluded from others. When in this mind state, people seek to validate their core sense of social acceptance through avoiding repudiation by a larger group. The desired tools that help them establish and maintain social relationships, that could be bending the knee, by eliminating barriers to commonalities or camaraderie. They valued the intrinsic feeling of community and connection that comes from not being disliked or rejected by others. And you can see the rest. Here's what they believe in these moments, or more likely to believe. This is how you would expect them to behave, or things that they would want to see in others' behaviors, and their preferences, right? All this does is hopefully give you a better perspective if you're seeing something in your attitudinal segmentation that their behavioral data doesn't reflect their attitudes. Right? It happens just all the time in segmentations. So we put somebody into a segmentation, we look at their purchases and like, why the hell aren't they buying healthy? Like they're the healthy observer of whatever attitudinal segmentation you're using, right? Well, 2 things. One is you have a bad segmentation. It happens. We would never do it at TriggerPoint, but I'm sure it happens, right? More likely, they have that attitude, but in a moment of high emotional arousal, like I want to be very healthy. I'm trying to lose weight like anybody else, but tonight I will be at the airport having 5 guys. I can guarantee that right around 6 o'clock. It's not what I want to do. It's what I have to do in the moment of emotional arousal. So that's just going to help you explain why you're not seeing in your behavioral data what you would expect from an attitudinal segmentation, right? So you're going to have that in your packet. Another thing I'm going to do, here's your cognitive trigger. This is behavioral economics. We have these shortcuts to decision making that help us make decisions quickly versus like cost benefit analysis. Should I burn down the city or not? Like, who thinks that way, right? We have cognitive triggers that help us make decisions quickly, whether it's burning down a city or whether it's, what kind of shoes am I going to buy? So in this case, somebody in this mind state will be more likely to be influenced by conformity effect, in-group bias, reciprocity, and inequality aversion. There's some others too. These are not the only ones, but these are things that we see in our research that again and again come up when somebody is in that belonging motivational state that we say, you know what, if I don't know anything about my customer, I'm going to use these. Or I'll do research to figure out which ones, right? But this helps give you some ideas. And you'll see in the behavioral activation briefs, not the ones in your packets, but in the back of the book, it'll give you a website and you can download all 18 of these things. I'm going to tell you kind of which ones you can use. So now's the time for the game. So here it is. You are Tyrion Lannister. You're the king's hand. Well, your table is. You're going to act as Tyrion Lannister. Throughout the Game of Thrones, Tyrion is, in large part, throughout the Game of Thrones, he is influencing all three of these characters, giving them advice, giving them counsel. So your job as a great marketing researcher like Tyrion is you must influence your future king or queen via these mind states that I just talked about. So remember, here is what our goal is. If I'm Tyrion Lannister, here's what I want. I want, in this case, if you have Jon Snow, I want Jon to accept the throne. He's not looking for power throughout the series. He doesn't really look and seek power. So you got to convince Jon to become the king because he's probably going to be a pretty good king if you know the series. He's going to be the best out of all these three for sure. And he's in the cautious belonging mind state. If you have Cersei Lannister, she already has the throne at the very end of the episode or of the series. You need to get her to relinquish the throne. Remember, that's kind of her goal, not her higher order goal. I don't think I think that's more of a functional goal. Like I want to be the queen. I want to be to have the Iron Throne. Why is that? She wants control. Ultimately, she wants control, and you can make the case. She wants love from nurturance from her dad. I can make that case too. But the idea is ultimately you've got to convince somebody who feels like she has everything she wants to relinquish the throne, and she uses optimistic empowerment mind state to make decisions. And lastly, if you have Daenerys, you are going to say, take the high throne or take the throne peacefully. Don't burn the city. Don't eat people, right? Optimistic empowerment. Oh, I'm sorry, optimistic achievement. I misread that. But your packet should be fine. She uses optimistic achievement mind state. So your packet will have the optimistic achievement mind state. Okay? So let's see what's on the next slide. So here's what's going to happen, guys. You're going to open up your packet to see who you're going to influence. It's like kind of like Oprah. Like, what do we get? Right? You're going to review the contents quickly. The big thing I would tell you to do is just go to that behavioral activation brief because we have a ton of time. Go to the behavioral activation brief, and you're going to have a packet that's been stapled. And it's going to kind of walk you through the activity. But basically, you're going to review the content. You're going to build the argument based upon your character's mind state. So what is the desired decision that you want the character to make? I just told you. It'll be in your packet too. I just told you. And then how do you link to your character's higher order goal? Now, I'm going to call on tables. I'm going to do all three characters. So first, I'm going to, who's got Daenerys? I'm going to pick out a table. And just you're going to tell me what your team came up with. Like how, if you were Tyrion Lannister, would you convince your character to take the Iron Throne? I'm going to walk around and see if you guys have any questions. Give you a couple minutes to do that. All right. You don't have to be perfect. It's a Friday. All right. Which tables had Jon Snow? If you will raise your hand, did Jon Snow tables? Jon Snow. Got another Jon Snow over here? You look like you're ready to present. Any other Jon Snows? Good. All right. So, who will rise to the occasion to present out Jon Snow, and how are you going to manipulate or persuade Jon Snow to take the throne? All you're going to do is have somebody at your table speak to your two questions. So, all I want you to do is how would you frame up the current situation to Jon and its impact on his higher order goal of being, if he takes the throne, how can it help him belong? And how would you convince Jon that he can limit discord by taking his place on the throne? Who would like to volunteer, if you're at Jon Snow's table, to speak to that? You will not be, well, we'll be a little bit judged, but. You think so? All right, Kevin, great.
So I don't know who all has seen the show, but John really looks up to his dad, Ned Stark. So that kind of plays into a lot of the decisions he makes throughout the show. And he really sticks to his people because that's something that Ned did. So what we think would really help is framing this as something that your dad would have done. And then in convincing him to limit his discord by taking place on the throne, Taylor made a good point of, if someone else takes the throne, there could be a lot of discord or turmoil that would make it harder for you to kind of find your place of people and just be a little bit more rocky. So in order to best take care of everyone, live up to your dad's dream for you, taking the throne would be the best thing to do.
Awesome. That's good. Amazing. Any other Jon Snow table that was like, I disagree, or anything like, no, we got something kind of slightly different? Yeah, please.
Not different. We talked a good bit about his loyalty to Daenerys at the end as well, right? And so trying to frame that up because he didn't want to break his promise. He bent the knee, right? That sort of thing. But for those who've seen the show, you know what happens, right? You have that decision to make of this is one person I have loyalty to versus I made, a promise to humanity, right? That's been a driver of his as well. And right, is, you had the quote up there earlier, it can just be one-on-one versus thousands of people having to die. He's the guy that will save lives.
Yep. Awesome. Very nicely done. Thank you. Okay, next, let's talk about the evil Cersei. Evil. Who has Cersei Lannister at their tables? We got 1, 2, 3. Awesome. 4. Okay, same idea, guys. Not going to be anything too mean or anything. Who would like to talk about how to influence Cersei? We'd like to? Go ahead, let's go, Catherine.
So we know that Cersei is very attached to her pride for being a Lannister and also to her children. So supposedly she was pregnant in the last, yeah. But basically our plan to her was we wanted to frame up that she could still have power and still have influence. So we were going to plan and say, let Jon Snow take the throne. He's weaker than you. And you would have a chance to kind of influence him in the ways that you've done before. And we also were thinking we would also give her the option to move back to Casterly Rock and remain queen, almost like the King in the North type of deal. There's still a queen. You're still going to have influence in the control. You just don't have and then you're pulling the strings more than having to be the figurehead.
That's great. That's exactly what I think about it. Awesome. I love that. That's great. I've never had anybody, go after Jon Snow like that and manipulate him. That's awesome. Would anybody else kind of have a different point of view on Cersei? Awesome.
I suppose it's somewhat similar, but we said we would sort of say to her that she has the opportunity to redefine what control really is, and it's not necessarily sitting on the throne, but being the person behind the scenes that has the control. And essentially that power is someone thinking that you're on their side when you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not being the puppet, it's being the puppet master. So you guys both came up with that. That's awesome. Great. Okay. Lastly is Daenerys. Which tables would like to discuss how they would influence Daenerys? Thank you.
So I've never seen the show. But so we were talking, I'm trying to remember exactly how we said it, but from the things we knew that she likes to be personally responsible. She likes positive feedback, and the peak point is really important to her. So if we could convince her that the peak point doesn't come in the battle, but it comes from saving the people and having a lot more people being all about you, and giving her that feeling of power that you could get more out of it and more of that peak at the end.
We think that we can convince her to save people from the evil Circe, just like she saved and freed up slaves. She can free up people in this kingdom. And what was that other thought we had? So not only to have more people to serve and admire her, but also to give them freedom. That's another thing she wants to achieve. And also her predecessors in the Targaryen dynasty, the most admired ones, took throne more by scaring people with dragons rather than actually killing lots of people. And they were beloved and remained on throne for many years. And I think they're the role models for her that we can play to that achievement. So that's what we want to achieve.
That's really good. I like the reminding her of the past, right? And the way to achieve doesn't have to be through death, but through intimidation. Roger. Any other table on Daenerys? Cool.
So no one on this table has ever seen the show, so we're probably going to come up with a very naive answer, but we'll go for it. So we decided that we would try and convince her to marry Jon Snow. So so that way she gets the control and the achievement without giving anything up.
For somebody who didn't see the show, there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that. I'll let you watch it. All right. So anyways, guys, here's the idea. I don't think you really have to understand the show. It helps. More time you spend with your consumer helps, right? But just understanding the mind state of somebody in these moments can give you direction where otherwise you didn't have much direction. And frankly, that may be the things that you said today, all are legit ideas that you could use to influence your marketing, your brand manager, your boss. In fact, if you understood the mind state of your boss when they are talking to you about X problem, you can influence their perceptions of you and your solutions to a problem. So how, if anyone would want to say one or two comments, how can this idea of mind states, these temporary moments of emotional arousal, understanding people, not their attitudes and beliefs, but understanding these moments in time that influence attitudes and beliefs, is there anything you could think of on how a mind state could help you at your team or your function, whether you're on the research side, if you're on the brand side? Any ideas you'd like to share?
It speaks to the way that we're influencing other people in our organizations, right? We have to, when we know it's the right thing for the organization, kind of meet them where they are and kind of guide them along the journey, be in the mindset that they're in side by side with them.
That's right. Thank you. Any other ideas? All right. With that, thank you. Here's what I'll tell you to do. If you text to 43506, you text Mindstate 2, 43506, there's a whole workbook that we'll send to you that tells you kind of step by step how you'd go through this whole process for your customer, for your boss, whatever. And then we'll send you an entire behavioral activation brief. You just saw 2 pages out of it. But it gets more generalized or whatever. The idea would be that when you do consumer research, you can fill in the gaps, you can fill in the holes, you can provide greater depth into your mind states that you want to focus on. But if you text mind state to 43506 now, whenever, you'll get that free stuff, okay? So with that, I will let you go on. And I guess there is no break now.
Great. So, very cool.
All right, guys, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.